Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and we're bringing back the no CTP tier list with a brand new addition, including all of the new characters and all of the new uniforms that we've gotten since the last 4.5 updates. Because the last time I did this, it was 7.0, so we are leapfrogging ahead quite a distance. There's a lot to cover here, so let's jump right in. First of all, standard PSA, this is just my opinion. These are just my thoughts. You're more than welcome to build up whatever character you want in whatever order you want. This is only to help players who really want to make the most out of their roster and get like a large amount of value for the least amount of resources, and specifically for this tier list for players who do not have or do not want to use CTPs for whatever reason, or you've equipped all the CTPs that you have, the existing CTPs that you have, and you don't have any new ones, but you want to build up a new really strong character. Like if you're out of CTPs and you're like, I'm thinking, you know, who's my next project? What's the next character that I'm going to build up? The next uniform that I'm going to look at building? You definitely want to go for one of these 16 Obelisk gods. These are characters, in my opinion, that can function extremely well basically to the point of being able to do end game or near end game content without needing a CTP. Now, that's not like, unlike the other tier lists and things like that, when you go over to the right, it doesn't mean that the characters get worse, because as you can see, we have very strong characters over in this 4th tier, which is the CTP needed tier for DPS. DPS is damage per second, or just damage. So this tier list is a little bit different. It's not exactly a tier list. It's more a way of classifying characters, in my opinion. So you have to pay close attention to at the top, right? This sort of tag that tells you what you're reading when you're looking down. So Obelisk gods you can play them very well with an Obelisk. They have easy rotations, or rotations that, you know, aren't going to be, you're not going to miss your proc a lot of the time. Then you have Obelisk demigods, which in my opinion, either they're a little bit worse than the Obelisk gods in terms of their damage, or they're a little bit harder to play. For example, Supergiant. She is by far an Obelisk god in the sense of being able to pump out tons of damage, but she's a little bit harder to play with an Obelisk compared to someone like Loki. Loki has a very easy, very straightforward rotation with his TVA or President Loki uniform, the new ones, and you will hit 95% of your damage proc activations. Whereas with Supergiant, you have to worry about the 6th skill, you have to worry about being moved back, sometimes you have to splash in the 1st skill to move forward, and you can end up missing your proc because of that, you know, so on and so forth. So there's a bit more there. Now her damage is on par or possibly better than Loki's, but the activation is not as good. On the other hand here, you know, Yelena is going to have great damage. She's going to be able to proc easily, but her damage is not going to be able to keep up with someone like Silks or Falcons. So in Yelena's case, it's not about her activation, it's not about the consistency, it's about the damage. So it's either the consistency or the damage for characters in this 2nd Obelisk demigod tier. Then in the 3rd tier, the 3rd column here, we have needs great RNG. This is basically like, you're not going to hit 100% of your procs. You're going to have to curse the game or do some kind of voodoo. There's just no way you're going to hit 100% of your procs with Dr. Doom. You'd have to be the best player, or you're going to need great RNG, you're going to need great luck, or you have to just play like crazy well. And as you notice, you can see the controller icon, hard to play, is listed on 1, 2, 3, 4 of these characters. Honestly, it should be on Dr. Doom. So 5 of these characters have it, and that's no coincidence because they fit the bill, needing great RNG if you're not using a CTP of Rage, Judgment in the case of characters like Spider-Woman and Scarlet Witch, etc. Then we have CTP needed. These characters just are not going to be able to function without a CTP, straight up. Luna Snow, Rogue, Apocalypse, so on and so forth. A regular Obelisk is not going to cut the cheese for these characters. Mephisto, again, not to say that Mephisto's a bad character, just that you're going to have a really crummy time. You're not going to have a fun time trying to play him with an Obelisk. Then we have CTP useful for support. Obviously, these support CTPs would generally just be a CTP of Insight. These are just support characters to buff up your damage, to buff up your leadership, etc., to buff up your defenses. And then we have a brand new category called Obelisk Gods PvP. These are characters that I think can function it's kind of cut off here. These are characters that I think can function very well with an Obelisk for PvP. Luke Cage, Daredevil, Jean Grey, Blue Marvel, so on and so forth. And of course, the ones that are tier 3 or transcended are bolded, in case you haven't figured that out yet, unless they have stayed in the same categories and they're not bolded. And then finally, the last 3 locations here. I know it's a lot to take in here, guys, but we've got Characters that have an easy proc, so they're very easy to use with an Obelisk, but they're not meta, in the sense like they're not going to be able to carry you to endgame content. And then we have CTP needed, but not meta as well. So these are characters that can't really work with an Obelisk, but also are not going to carry you to endgame content. And then we have the last category of just like sad fish characters that don't really deserve anything right now, in my opinion, as far as like a meta perspective goes, and they just need a massive rework. So yeah, I've highlighted here. I don't want to talk about this category too much, but I highlighted these characters here. Obviously, Scorpion, Viper, and Gwenpool have not been transcended or tier 3'd, but I think these are very good characters that are just beyond the cusp of the meta. Like, especially for free-to-plays, you guys know how much I love Scorpion, and Viper's pretty good too. Gwenpool's not really free-to-play with her uniform, with her paid uniform, but she's very, very strong for a character that doesn't have a Transcendence or a tier 3 just because of that uniform. So yeah, anywho, moving back to the more important side of the tier list here, Obelisk gods. Like, Captain Falcon is pretty obvious. He just does tremendous amounts of damage. All of his buffs just, you know, accelerate his damage to an insane level. He can be a little bit wonky to proc on sometimes, but I think it's just a matter of practice. I don't really have enough practice with him necessarily, and I hesitate to put him here just because his damage is so absurdly high. It's crazy high, his damage. We've got Silk. Of course, she needs her new uniform, but she's also very, very good. And then we have Corvus added onto this list here, to this Obelisk God category, along with Deadpool. Deadpool just stays here because with the Holiday Lady Deadpool uniform and an Obelisk, you can basically just go up to stage 99 with 0 Pierce. Like, even before Pierce, Deadpool was one of the only characters that could do that. For the combat class, we really only have the addition of Cull Obsidian. I also moved some characters out of this tier, like I moved Iron Fist and I moved Maker out of this list because I just don't think they're Obelisk gods compared to someone like Cull Obsidian, in my opinion, along with Moon Knight and Venom. The only sort of awkward one here in the Obelisk gods in general is Cersei, because if you notice, all of the other characters are tier 3/transcended. The reason why I put Cersei there is because she's just that busted. I just want to highlight how busted Cersei is. You can get her for free, and you slap an Obelisk on her, and she just does insane amounts of damage. She is basically the tier 2 version of Deadpool. She's super duper strong. Now, again, she can be a little bit wonky with the proc sometimes, or just a little bit wonky if you're trying to accumulate on purpose. But I feel like it's just time, you know, there's just a matter of time before she gets an upgrade and then becomes even more busted than she already is. And then here we have, so we really don't have anyone new for the blast types. And then for the universal Obelisk gods, we just have Loki with the TVA / President Loki uniform. This is not the same for the Agent of Asgard uniform, so keep that in mind. You have to be using the newest uniform for Loki, but it is very much so a big jump for him, not only in terms of his damage and his survivability, but also in terms of how easy it is to proc with him. Now, basically everything else moving to the right has had like a massive mostly a massive facelift. Like, the Obelisk gods category is half new, half old. From last time we did this, the CTP needed for DPS is mostly old. As you can see, I really only added Crescent and Ebony Maw because they got reworks, and they still need CTPs if they're going to do work. Ebony Maw, just his rotation has a lot of canceling, you know, 5 cancel, 4 cancel, 3 or whatever. So there's too much canceling for him to be really used with, well, I guess you could say actually that you could use an Obelisk with him. I just find that he's very spammy, but I guess you could just you can sort of insta cancel 5 and 4. So you could make the argument that he really doesn't need. Yeah, I think I just realized that. I think you can definitely make the argument for him that he just needs a little bit of RNG and you're good to go. Okay, I'm gonna move him actually. True. With all the canceling, I play him very spammy with a Judgment, but I think you can get away with an Obelisk, with like a mind damage Obelisk. True. Interesting. Winter Soldier got a big upgrade. He's still kind of hard to play. He still kind of dies easily because they didn't give him a heal. But, you know, he's there and then needs RNG. He just needs RNG because of the 5th skill. You have to delay cancel the 5 before you go into the 4. Right? It's 3, delay cancel 5, delay into 4. So that's really what puts him there, what keeps him there. I also moved Gwenom down, the Spider Gwenom. I moved her down because she's just not, you know, before she was here in Obelisk Gods because we didn't have any of these 3 characters. So the speed class was actually hurting real bad. Real bad. But now it's a lot more balanced. We have a lot, you know, the ceiling is a lot higher. So you see the limitations of someone like Gwenum, and so she gets bumped down here. Katie and Wenwu, honestly, they're not really Obelisk demigods. I just didn't want to already relegate them and like disappear them to the sort of easy proc, not meta category. But I think they're already on the way there. They're still very strong when you compare them to characters of their class, you know, regular tier 2 characters, especially Katie. You can compare her to someone like Scarlet Spider, who can one-shot and who, you know, is very strong for just being a tier 2 character, but it really depends. I know a lot of players right now are just looking at tier 3s and Transcended, so tier 2s don't even, you know, register on their radar, but I just wanted to highlight that she does pump out a lot of damage for just having an Obelisk and not having a CTP. Also, Shang-Chi, Black Panther got his rework, but Shang-Chi, I just want to point out that he needs a leadership tag here. This one, I think, is going to be more subjective. A lot of people told me when Shang-Chi came out that he was terrible, that he wasn't good, and I proved them wrong with, you know, level 40, stage 40 null clears and stuff like that with the CTP of Rage. I think it's really going to depend on whether you can play him or not. I think he can be, like, my attitude towards him being a demigod in the Obelisk category is that you can give him, like, he could easily be a PvP Obelisk god, right there with Luke Cage, I believe, right? On the other hand, you could just give him an Obelisk and he's gonna miss some of his procs, so he's gonna be sort of hard to proc in a sense, or he needs great RNG. But in the other sense, it doesn't really matter what his Obelisk is because he just does so much damage, if that makes sense. So it didn't really make sense to put him with someone like Iron Fist because he just eclipses Iron Fist's damage tenfold, right? But he's a lot harder to proc on consistently compared to someone like Maker. So I kind of had a hard time with Shang-Chi. We're getting a lot more unique characters that are sort of difficult to peg down and sort of really highlight amongst the forest of other characters, 244 characters now. But I think this is a good place for Shang-Chi. Just know that you're going to miss procs with him for sure, but know that when you hit the procs with him, it's going to hit back, right? You're going to feel it in your bones because he hits so dang hard. Human Torch, I think I had over-evaluated. I had put him in an Obelisk God. I think it's a little bit of an over-evaluation, not in terms of the damage, but in terms of how consistent he is. I don't think he's as consistent as, you know, characters here like Gambit and Cable and Sharon Rogers. I don't think so. I mean, he doesn't have the damage of Sharon Rogers for sure, and probably Cable. He probably competes with Gambit, but Gambit's going to be way more consistent than Human Torch, so I had to sort of highlight that there. We also moved Iron Man down for basically the same reason. His damage is not quite as good, and the consistency is not quite as good there. And then Rescue sort of rounds out the group here. Again, you could make the argument that Rescue's already she already has one foot out the door for the meta, definitely. But we'll highlight her for now, just because she's new, and otherwise she would just disappear into the ether, and I don't like that. And then down here we have Quasar and Medusa. Quasar was actually a surprise, like a surprisingly good character in that Ultimates update, and I think she sort of, you know, got swept under the rug. She's a paywall character. I know it's kind of annoying, but she's not bad at all, and she can easily work with an Obelisk. Her rotation is super easy once I figured it out, you know, asterisk there, but definitely is going to outpace Medusa, I think, under similar circumstances, and it has a much easier rotation than Medusa does, in my opinion. Medusa, honestly, I don't even think she should be here. I think she honestly needs great RNG. I would honestly put her here. It's very difficult. It's the first proc, like the Transcended proc with Medusa, is really easy. It's just 3 cancel 6 and then delayed cancel 5, or you can just proc on 6 or proc on 5. But after that, it gets kind of wonky. She's got a wonky cooldown on 5, I believe. I believe like the 5 cooldown is like 20 seconds. So let me just pull this up here so I can look. Her 5 has 17-second cooldown, which is a little bit wonky. And then her 4 has a 15-second cooldown. So you're sort of torn between canceling 3 into 4 or canceling 3 into 5, and neither one of them has that many hits. So you may actually not proc initially with her. So yeah, she's maybe a little bit easier to proc on than Black Bolt. So maybe I'll swap that, but it's basically going to require some RNG. We've got Icarus, Thor here, pretty straightforward. These characters are just, you know, they're starting to show the difficulty, right? Because Thor, you want to 3 cancel 5, and then you want to hold 4. You're gonna proc on 4. It's kind of weird, right? And then Scarlet Witch, you basically canceling everything, right? You're doing like 2 cancel 4, cancel 5, cancel 1, cancel 3. Are you gonna proc on that? Are you sure? Probably not. You're gonna miss like half your procs, right? So we started to get into really awkward territory where, again, the character is amazing. Don't get me wrong. but it's going to be really hard to use them with an Obelisk. Amadeus Cho and X23 and Iron Fist, honestly, all three of these are probably on their way out of the meta. But again, if you don't put anyone here, it's just going to look weird. The combat class is not really going to be highlighted. But keep in mind that, you know, it begs repeating again for this tier list, because I think it's pretty straightforward once you understand that the characters, you sort of need to pair this tier list with the existing tier list, because you need to understand that, you know, just because a character like Black Panther is here, it doesn't mean he's like the 6th strongest combat type. It just means that he's a lot easier to proc on than Crescent is. Crescent is a nightmare to proc on. You'd pull your hair out, right? But in terms of like value, Crescent has more value than Black Panther, sadly. Apocalypse has more value than Black Panther, sadly, right? So hopefully that makes sense to you guys, and hopefully you get a lot out of this. But definitely, if you don't have any CTPs, but you're looking for a very, very strong character to build up, you definitely want to look in these first 2 categories. By far, these are where you're going to get the most value, and you're going to get the most bang for your buck, and these characters are going to perform super duper well without a CTP. After that, you're going to get into the category of characters that are going to be not as strong, or characters that are going to struggle a lot. Like, you know, X23, Amadeus Cho, Spider-Woman, not as strong as, you know, your Doctor Dooms, your Scarlet Witches, your War Machines, your Ebony Maws, your Quicksilvers. But on the other hand, Black Widow's kind of a pain in the butt to proc on. Spider-Woman, kind of hard to proc on. Thor, Icarus, you know, these characters are not going to make it easy for you. You're going to miss procs. It's going to be frustrating. You may not feel like they're really reaching their full potential because they are missing their Obelisk damage activations. And then you have characters down here that basically you're not going to have fun unless you give them a CTP, right? Particularly Rage and Judgment. So yeah, focus on these 4 categories here, but basically focus on the first 2 and then the 4th one for big gains in the, you know, in the meta in general, but then those first 2 on the left for big gains in the Obelisk meta. So hopefully this list has been helpful to you guys. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts and opinions, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.